Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. Today we have myself and Anthony, and we are here doing UFC 318. We have Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier fighting for the BMF title atop of the card. It's in Dustin's home state of Louisiana for his retirement fight, and then we round out the card with not the best card you've ever seen, but I wouldn't say it's a downright terrible card. Should have some fun fights and a good amount to talk about. And we will start right off at the main event. Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier for the BMF title. Max Holloway looking to become the first fighter to defend the BMF title. Dustin Poirier looking to get his hands on it for the first time after losing to Justin Gaethje. And Max Holloway also looking to break an 0-2 run versus Dustin Poirier. The pair first fought years ago in Max Holloway's UFC debut, and then they fought again. That was for the interim title. I believe that was 2018 or so. I don't remember the year off the top of my head, but that was still quite a few years ago. And now Max Holloway fully committed to lightweight and now just coming up from featherweight. Obviously, Dustin Poirier on his retirement fight. So lots of history between these two. Two of the biggest fan favorites in the sport. And there's kind of a lot at stake here, even though it's a retirement fight. So there's a lot of moving pieces here in this main event. Anthony, what do you make of the main event of Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier?
I think it's a great fight, specifically for it being like Poirier's retirement fight, possible retirement fight. Like that all makes sense. I think where they're both at too makes sense, and the UFC getting to use the BMF title to kind of slap on another pay-per-view card makes sense to me. So overall, I think this would more be better suited for like a co-main or maybe I don't know if you could put these people as the third fight of a pay-per-view card, but even just a co-main, and I think everyone would love this. I do think that it's probably not the best card overall, and just having a Poirier Holloway doesn't make it that much better or save the pay-per-view. I think it's one of the weaker pay-per-views we've had, but in general, I still think these are two fighters with two huge fan favorites with big fan bases, and Max Holloway, we'll see how many fights he has left, but this possibly being Poirier's last, I think it's good. It has at least all the eyes or all the attention that it can get. So,
Yeah, I like how you mentioned that little could be Dustin's last fight, because I think if Dustin loses, I think it's his last fight for sure. But personally, still not convinced that if he finds a way to get it done on Saturday, that he's not fighting again. Because I hold Max Holloway in the regard of if you beat Max Holloway, you get to fight for the title next. Like that's just, and you can say that about a lot of other guys in this lightweight division. But for Poirier, I think that would hold true, and I'd be fine with him getting a title shot if he won. Um, and I think a lot of people, this is Max up at 155. I think a lot of people forget the success that he had against Gaethje at 155 in his move up. That was before he even burned the boats and committed to staying at 155. When he went up to 155 to fight Gaethje, which he had a great performance, obviously, he still had 145 in the back of his mind. He obviously did the work to prepare himself for 55. But he knew that if he won, going back down was a real possibility. And that's what happened. And now, after he lost to Ilya, obviously the durability may be a question. And I think that's fair, considering it was his first knockout loss of his career. How does he bounce back? There's a lot of serious questions there. But the success that he was having at 55, for him to now burn the boats at 55 and stay there, I think is something that could be a positive for him. And I think it's something that a lot of people forgot about. As far as his success in the weight class goes.
yeah, I'd agree. I think when it comes to his actual like physicality and whether he should be a 155 or all that, I have no problem. Like you said, he comes in, beats Gaethje, who arguably should have been fighting for the title shot next at that time. Um, I think the only big concern on the Max Holloway side when it comes to like outside of the octagon, the more just intangibles, physicals, is just the fact that he got knocked out. Like the titanium jaw finally like broke for the first time. And some fighters we've seen have responded horribly to that, and it's just a snowball effect. And so I think that mixed with the fact that he's going up in weight, I understand those concerns. But overall, when it comes to him being an actual 155er and continuing the rest of his career that way, I see no issue. I mean, he did everything he needed to do at 145. That Volk quadrilogy is probably not happening. So I think he's more than capable of moving up and being successful at 155.
Yeah, and meanwhile, it's a weird fight for Dustin as well, because with Dustin and this being the retirement fight, I don't know exactly how to feel about that. I'm fine with him retiring, but going out against Max Holloway being the guy, it just feels like he's not taking an easy retirement fight. Like, there's easier guys he could have fought on the way out. There's a lot of different routes this could have went, and I think he found himself in a hard spot, even if he wins. I don't think this is going to be an easy one for him at all. And maybe this ends up being a situation where these two guys have a fight of the year contender. They pour it out, BMF title on the line, and Poirier walks away, and it's a storybook ending. But I just don't know if that's the case, considering the skill level that these two guys are at. When you've got one guy who is prepping for a run in a different division, and you've got another guy who's much more concerned about how his exit from the sport looks. I think that's a weird dynamic to have for a fight, and obviously not one we see, because we see retirements often. We see retirement fights often, but very rarely are those retirement fights against a guy of Max Holloway's caliber, or you could just say a top 5, top 10 guy in general. This seems like it is a nasty comparison, but last week Lauren Murphy fought someone completely unranked and very different scenario. But Robbie Lawler fought Nico Price, and there's a lot of guys who in their retirement fights, they're not fighting guys who are of this caliber, and I find that very interesting for Poirier, but at the same time, I guess he's leaving it a little bit earlier, so it does make it a little bit easier to pull off that type of retirement fight.
Yeah, I do think, like you said earlier too, if even though I think Poirier is a little washed or over the hill, not that he still can't beat people, but if he's planning for like another title shot, that would be a rough one to get me on board for. But like you said, I mean, if you beat Max Holloway, then it's like, I almost don't want you to retire. Like that win in itself is huge for me. But I think the ideal for everyone, the ideal for the UFC, the ideal for fans would to see that 5-round war like you were talking about, which I don't think is out of the realm of possibility too. You have two durable guys, two vets that have been in there and been through tough waters before too. So, I mean, they definitely have the skills and the grit to do it. I think was Poirier's last fight still that Islam one? He hasn't fought since. So, I mean, and that one went 5, and that was a good little back and forth in itself. So, I do think that could be a real possibility, especially with, I'm going to trust Max's chin and just say Ilya got him that one time. I think I see this fight probably going to a decision. I don't know if I want to give Max the finish. I mean, he's 0-2 against him and such, but obviously now it's way different. That was very early in their careers compared to, or at least in Max's career too, specifically compared to now. But I do think Max, besides headhunting, which he had done in the other fights a little bit, I think the first one too, but maybe working the body more and slowing and hopefully kicking the legs too for Poirier, but really working on slowing him down and then maybe finding the right connections and stuff up top. But I don't know. I could definitely see the war. I don't know if I would predict the finish, but I am definitely going Max on this one. I would be curious too to see if anyone uses a ground game. I wouldn't think that's likely, and especially with it being the retirement fight, they're both kind of big egos and like to put on a show. I think all 5 rounds on the feet too would be very likely, and then like you said, the 5 rounds on the feet between these two people, like it's got to be a pretty fun, entertaining fight too, with the way all of their careers have played out so far. So,
yeah. Betting odds have it Max Holloway -132, Dustin Poirier plus 104. That's been a slight move in the favor of Max Holloway. There was one point it was minus 108 Holloway, minus 112 Poirier. So it has seen some money come in on Max. And I think that's reasonable. I'll be honest here. I bet Max when the line dropped because I thought minus 108 was a little ridiculous. So that's where my money and picks are sitting at this point. And, when I look at this fight, Max has said, if you are trying to get a family member, a friend into MMA, this is the one you show them. And I think that's a very real possibility. I doubt we see much grappling at all. Something would have to be going pretty wrong for somebody to grapple here. I think the last time Max has grappled offensively, it would depend on your definition of grappling offensively, but he rolled an anaconda choke on Korean Zombie. That wasn't much grappling there. And then prior to that, he was getting kicked in the leg a little much by Yair Rodriguez for his liking and landed some takedowns. Poirier, you see him grapple, but most of it's jumping guillotines and dealing with either the successes or consequences of that. And obviously has spent a lot more time grappling, just purely based on who he's fought. He's fought a lot more proactive offensive grapplers. Ilya grappled a little bit against Max, but not an insane amount. So I don't think we're going to see much grappling. If we do, I think it's going to be someone gets hurt and the other guy grabs a neck and tries to land a front choke. I think, or maybe just put a head in a wrong position. Maybe they don't have to be hurt. So I think that's the most extent of grappling we'll see, especially takedowns. Maybe we see some clinch work, but don't think we see much actual offensive wrestling and trying to control position. And then when I look at this fight, I like Max. I think the two big issues Max could have are leg kicks. I think there's a chance Dustin really has some success with some leg kicks and limits his movement a little bit. And then the other would be Max is reaping the consequences of that first knockout loss, whether that be a durability decrease or a confidence decrease or something of that matter. Maybe it's not even the durability itself, but some mental things. Maybe that's an issue post KO. And that doesn't mean Dustin can't have success at all. I just like a lot of the things from Max Holloway in this matchup. He's fighting a guy who's a good boxer, who's going to look to land his jab, wants to get off some combinations, wants to throw his hooks. And his last two fights have been Justin Gaethje and Ilya Topuria. Like, it's not saying all these guys have the same exact style, but the skills that Max has been trying to develop over these last three fights are all skills that have worked in each subsequent matchup. He's made it a focal point in those last two fights in improving his footwork and making sure he isn't getting pushed his back to the fence. So those have been things that he's worked hard on, evidently. And he's also much bigger than the first two times we fought Poirier. The first time I almost don't even count because he didn't even know what jiu-jitsu was. He goes out there, gets subbed. It happens, especially I think Max was the youngest fighter on the UFC roster at the time. And then the second time they fight, he came in not great shape as a consequence of being the 145-pound champion, moving up to 155 without a ton of time to prepare. So, we saw when he fought Gaethje the difference in what he looks like now versus then at the weight class. Much more muscular, much more filled out, not as much fat on Holloway at this stage of his career. So, and then another thing I like from Holloway is I think he's got more weapons in terms of kicks to all three levels. He's got that spinning kick. He'll throw some elbows. And Max is great, which we've talked about this before, at creating a game plan and figuring out which one of those weapons he needs to be using. We talked about that after the Gaethje fight. In the Topuria fight, he's throwing a lot of lead kicks to try and keep those hands of Topuria occupied, throwing a lot of teeps, a lot of the things people wanted to see Oliveira do. Holloway was out there doing it. Obviously, he still lost that fight, but I prefer to see the intelligence and the smart game planning and the utilization of the right strikes to go out there and find success. Those are all things I love from Holloway. And then as far as cardio goes, I think Holloway is one of the few guys that can match Dustin as far as cardio goes. So I don't expect Holloway to get to round 3, 4, or 5 and be feeling the effects of that. So those are kind of the list of reasons I like Holloway. And then on the cherry on top is like he's not the one retiring. Max Holloway wants to fight for belts still. Doesn't mean Poirier doesn't want to fight for belts, but one guy's older and is clearly closer to being out of the sport. So a lot of things, in my opinion, favoring Holloway here.
Yeah, and I agree, especially with that fight. I think the other fight was in 2019, and I believe that's where maybe that was where the clip was, where Max was like he's blocking weed and stuff like that. But since then, like 6 years later, Max has added, like you said, so many other strikes in his arsenal. He's gotten better in every facet, and sticking with that thing where Max Holloway really is good at finding a good game plan and then executing it as well. I just think where these two are at in their careers, how I think Max is still a top fighter, and Dustin Poirier is maybe a little over the hill, definitely to me. I trust Max and his team to find a good in 2025, figure out the game plan to finally beat him. And I trust Max to sit there and execute it. I don't think Max never really slips up or has huge blunders in his fights that will be taken advantage of. So I trust him to stay in there, work the body. Like you said, he has the cardio to go all 5 too. And we've seen him against Cater, I think land the most significant strikes in a fight. So he definitely has all those tools. And then, like you said, the only thing I was worried about was, and I see the durability concerns, and then there's the other thing I would say is when you're 0-2 against someone, sometimes, maybe it happens in other sports too, but definitely UFC, sometimes people just maybe have your card and they have your style and it's a bad matchup for you. But I would also agree with it's almost not even fair to count the first one, and the second one had all the asterisks it had, with it, like you said, with the weight and everything and the time. And considering Max just looked really phenomenal against Gaethje, and like an all-time performance, almost definitely an all-time knockout to finish it. I think we could see another great performance here. I don't know if we'll see the knockout like that though, definitely, but I would definitely be leaning Max.
Yeah, Max went on a little mini run there for a second of just knocking guys out cold with Gaethje and Korean Zombie. And I do think that's a credit to his power being underrated. I don't think people give him enough credit for how hard he hits, especially when he's landing shots like that. But at the same time, I don't think those are, the thing to expect. I think those will tend to be more outliers. I still think the way that Holloway is going to get finishes throughout the rest of his career is going to be more pouring on volume in the late stages of a fight. And sometimes those things don't really result in a finish, like that Cater fight's a great example. Did everything, but knocked the guy out. And sometimes guys can tough that out. And maybe that's what Poirier does here in his last showing in MMA. So I think that's a real possibility, but I think we've touched on everything that kind of sticks out to me is, I'm taking Holloway for a multitude of reasons, and we've touched on him. Improvements. Footwork was a big one for me, and kind of the circumstances around those first fights. So, and another thing I'll say is it's not a coincidence at all to me that Volkanovski's the guy that went 3-0 against Holloway in trilogies, because when you're talking about fight IQ and game planning and things that we're giving Holloway credit for right now, you could make an argument Volkanovski is the best in the history of the sport at those things. So like Holloway could be, maybe not top tier all time, but maybe he's in that second tier all time of doing those things. And he really only, had struggles with those when he was going up against a guy who was top tier, like not very many better in the history of the sport at doing that type of stuff than Volkanovski. So I want to make that note as well. And, if Poirier wasn't the hardest hitter in the history of the 145-pound division, who knows how that fight goes. So it is what it is. I mean, those are the realities. That's how you win and lose fights. But I just think those things are not present in this fight, which is why I like Holloway. And I know I already said last thing, but actual last thing for me is I've said this many times and I'll say it again. I think that Holloway versus Poirier fight is going to age pretty good for Holloway. I don't think many guys are going to outperform that in, I don't remember how long exactly that fight went. We'll just say 10 to 15 minutes.
3 rounds, right?
Yeah, the knockout happened in the third round.
In the third.
10 to 15 minutes of striking exchanges. I don't think many guys are going to outperform what Holloway did, even though he obviously lost that fight. So I think he deserves credit for that. And maybe that won't come for a significant period of time. And we got to see some more from Poirier before people look back and go, well, Holloway didn't do too bad. A lot of people thought he won some rounds. And I don't think that's going to be a consistent for Poirier's career. So
that's why Josh Emmett's the hardest fight Poirier's ever had.
I mean, which it is funny because Max and Josh Emmett have both come out and been like, Poirier's not that good.
That's the one, like the Max understandable, like you said. And I know I had him winning. I don't know if it was the first. I thought I might have had Max winning a round before that fight got stopped. But the Josh Emmett is the real outlier now after Poirier is on the run of just knocking everyone out. Then you go back farther enough, you're like, oh my God, he went 5.
Yeah, he goes 5, and then after the fight, he says, "I think Dan Ige is harder than him." So, which is quite funny. As much as I love Dan Ige, and we'll talk about him in a little bit, and he gets credit for being a hard hitter. I'm just not ready to crown him over to Poirier quite yet when we're talking about hard hitters. So, all right. Moving on to the co-main event, we have someone who I don't know if this person should be fighting in co-main events of pay-per-views. We have Paulo Costa versus Roman Kopylov. The curious case of Paulo Costa. I don't really know what to make of Paulo Costa at this point in his career. He's had some weird performances. I think that Sean Strickland fight is weird. As much as like Sean won, but that was kind of more of Paulo not doing anything for 25 minutes, and that was a really weird fight. You have the you have the Luke Rockhold fight in Salt Lake City. Luke's last fight in the UFC, that was a weird fight. You have the Vettori fight where Paulo, shows up for a middleweight fight, says, I'm going to weigh in at light heavyweight. And when Vettori starts complaining, he says, that's your personal problem. Which is wild. It was funny at the time, but when you're looking at these are your 3 most recent performances, you really, you start to raise an eyebrow. And I think the fight before that might have been the Adesanya fight, excuse my memory, but it's been a strange run for Paulo Costa, needless to say. A load of cancellations in there, and he's quietly gotten to 34 years old. Oh, he had the Whitaker fight in there. I completely skimmed over the Whitaker fight. That was a really good fight.
Well, that's why I thought you were just skipping that, just because that was an actual, like, understandable fight, how that played out.
Yeah, that was logical. Good fight. Paulo Costa landed that spinning wheel kick, I believe it was, and had him hurt. I forgot about that fight. That was a great fight. If we see more of that from Paulo Costa, I'd love to see how this pans out here. But we've got him booked against Roman Kopylov, a rising name at middleweight. Lost in his last opportunity to get ranked against Anthony Hernandez. Much different stylistic matchup compared to Paulo Costa. Goes back, picks up a win over Almeida, and now he's back here in these rankings again, getting another chance to get ranked. What do you make of Paulo Costa returning to a UFC pay-per-view to fight Roman Kopylov?
I'd be fine with this fight on anywhere else on the, like on the fight list. But yeah, I think I do find Costa, he was one of the ones that I liked when this division was a bit down and stuff. And I found him at least a little entertaining. But now, as you were naming out his last, couple fights, it's been pretty hit or miss. But then he'll have that Whitaker fight where you get a little bit of hope maybe. Because he's also like, he was so good at one point and such a high riser before that Adesanya. It seems like threw everything off, and then he started doing secret juice and becoming a Twitter troll. But I still like a bit of his game, even if he's a shell of his former self. And then Kopylov, I think's a very fun striker too, and he's super entertaining. He's been shown the holes in his game, like you mentioned, that fluffy. But then again, Fluffy does that to most people in that division with his style of wrestling, but he's also been taken down and in some of his other fights as well, which is the bigger concern. But I think this has the potential to be a fun striking fight. We've seen Costa have those in the past. It just hasn't really been too recently. Um, but I think, and it's not like Kopylov's really gonna offensive wrestle and or take. He's probably gonna get out, out strength in the strength department against Costa as well. So I think Kopylov's obviously gonna want to make this a stand up, and he has the gas tank for it too, to go high volume for 3 rounds. So I think this has the potential to be fun. I just don't think in the year 2025 main eventing Paulo Costa is nice to your fans.
Yeah. So I have some similar thoughts, and I tend to think Roman Kopylov is on the overrated side, just the way he gets priced and the way I've seen some people speak about him that act like he's like the greatest striker of all time. And some of those things really, really confuse me. But I do think he has some legit tools. Southpaw, really quick. One is fast. If he throws the one with the two behind it, it's fast. Great body kick from Southpaw. He'll take it upstairs. All those things are tremendous. But then it's like, all right, what's after that? I believe he's landed a couple counters, but like the guys he's landing counters on are like sloppy, pressure guys. Like I think he countered Punahele Soriano off the top of my head, and Soriano's just coming in with windmill overhands. Like, all right, yes, you did land a nice counter, but at the same time, like, how much stock do I put in a guy who looks like he's out there swimming? Getting countered. Like that's kind of what you should do. But he did it, so credit to him. So, and then I look at Paulo Costa, and I don't know what I'm going to do here because Paulo Costa is just a guy that I look right at the trap in every fight, and I stare at it and go, "Don't step in that, James. You really shouldn't step in the Paulo Costa trap." And then before the fight happens, I stick my foot right in it, and I get got every single time. And I kind of want to step in the trap again here. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of want to pick Paulo Costa. But at the same time, like I'm very aware that if I pick Paulo Costa, he may just stand there and get like 1-2 and kicked in the body for 15 minutes, and I'll want to punch a hole through my TV. It's like that would not be a very fun thing to be on the wrong side of if he does lose this fight. So, one thing I will say about Paulo is when he's pressuring and putting the heat on guys, he's very, very good. Big punches, much more athletic than he's given credit for. Like we talked about, he landed that spinning kick on Robert Whitaker. Good kicks, fast. Like he does a lot of good things. Digs to the body as well. And I think that if he gets inside on Kopylov, he may just beat him up to the body, and land some shots upstairs. But once again, it comes at the risk of him standing there and doing fucking nothing for 15 minutes. And I just don't know how I feel in that regard. Betting odds, as far as those are concerned, we've got Paulo Costa as a plus 200 dog versus a minus 265 favorite in Kopylov. So I think the betting odds are kind of reflective of, Paulo Costa might just go out there and lay an egg.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons he was so exciting as a prospect too, is because he's obviously, looks like he was carved out of stone. He has like one of the best physiques in the UFC, but he's not just a overhand big guy. Like he actually had slick striking and could put combinations, and like you said, would work the body. And then obviously he's so big and strong that he's hard to grapple in that sense too. But that's why, with what you said too about him laying an egg, that's why I'm actually tempted to. I'm leaning Kopylov to maybe get the decision win, or like you said, do nothing. Too, it sucks because besides Adesanya, he's really hard to finish. So he will just do nothing for 15 minutes too. You can't even like be put out your misery with him getting finished. But I think I'm leaning Kopylov, and that's more of an indictment on where I finally think Costa is. But still, I can still see Costa I think he's one win in his last 4 or 5, getting another one. I think Kopylov is beatable, and that goes to as much as I like his striking, but that goes to you thinking he's a bit on the overrated side. I've never been extremely blown away by him as a fighter, but I still think he has the striking that elevates him past a lot of opponents. So I think I'll stick with a light lean on Kopylov.
Mm-hmm. And I thought about saying this was going to be a big step down in competition for Paulo Costa. Fought Robert Whitaker, Israel Adesanya, kind of scratched the Vittori fight out because he showed up fat and clearly just showed up. So yeah, he lost, but I don't think that's indicative of his skills when he's showing up in prime condition. But then he fought Sean Strickland, who sucks. So it's really not a step down in competition.
Yeah.
But then again, he also stood there and stared at Sean Strickland, like we've talked about. So I really wanted to pick Costa, but I haven't committed to it yet. This is a preview that I haven't written yet, so I don't have my pick in stone. And I'm probably going to grapple with it until I write the prediction. I'll probably write this one last, and then I'll make like a Hail Mary of a pick and throw out a Paulo Costa pick and just be out Saturday when I'm watching the fight. I'll be like, why the hell did I do that? I could have just not did this, and I knew it wouldn't be good, but I just can't quit. Hoping to see a good version of Paulo Costa, because if Paulo can go out there and perform, that's a guy who is exciting in this division, and I'd like to have more guys like Paulo Costa at middleweight than less of them. So maybe I'm just living on a dream when it comes to Paulo Costa.
Yeah, I've been more tempted to give up that dream finally, but also I will say that's the difference between us doing this on a Wednesday and on a Friday. We actually have time still to research more and before we fully have to make up our mind, which is nice.
Yep. And breaking news, not great breaking news, but some people might care. Tony Ferguson has got a fight booked. It's boxing.
Oh, okay.
He's boxing Salt Poppy at Misfits 22 on August 30th.
Am I supposed to know who that is?
I believe it's an influencer, not a professional fighter. So that one just was sent to me via text message and made me sad. So I figured I'd share that with everyone, so I wasn't sad by myself.
Concerned at first too, because I just saw an interview with him. I think it was with Schmo or someone, and he was like, I don't know, he seemed like he was doing better. He was like in a pretty cool spot. I was like, liked what he was saying, and then you're like, oh, he's fighting again. I was like, oh god, no.
Yeah,
but
my group chat with all my MMA friends sent like 7 text messages, and I was like, this cannot be good. And that's what it was. Tony Ferguson booking a fight. So wonderful.
I think Tony can win the belt in boxing, though. He's that type of guy.
Yeah, he's probably gonna ankle pick this guy in boxing. That'd be funny. I'd be back in.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on with UFC 318. Kevin Holland versus Daniel Rodriguez. They just pulled out all the stops for this card. I'll tell you what. They needed a main card fight, and they called Kevin, and Kevin said, yes, I'll fight. Who am I fighting? And they said, well, we'll find out. And they just went down the list of, hey, will you fight Kevin Holland in a month? I assume they started somewhere in the rankings and just kept going down the list and down the list and down the list some more. And then they called D-Rod, and D-Rod said yes. And they were like, yeah, that's fine, I guess. We've seen this kind of fight from Kevin Holland multiple times. Aging veteran at 170. This is like the tee-up spot for him. But the difference is he's going into this tee-up spot off of like good performances. Like usually he goes into these tee-off spots off like 4 losses, and you're like, all right, we should get Kevin back on track here. But this one just feels like a tee-up spot right in the middle of a win streak, which I'm just like, I don't really have a lot here. I think he just keeps the ball rolling.
Which I'm fine with too, actually. Yeah. I know we've talked about him staying at welterweight and that he needs to stop being the company man and taking these tough middleweight fights against wrestlers too a lot of the time, which is unfortunate for him. And that, I mean, the run he was on before he lost to Wonderboy, it's like, no, Kevin Holland is actually a really good fighter without all the big mouth stuff and all the other stuff that people might like throw some negativity on him for or count him out for. But when he's actually focused and stuff, he is a good fighter. And like you said, I think D-Rod beat Ponzi in his last one. That was a good little knockout too. Got a finish, which was good. I can't remember the last time he had finished someone before that. So D-Rod's coming off a good win on his own, but I perfectly agree with you. I think this should be another layup. He should probably walk through him with another win here. So
Yeah, and I think the problem with the D-Rod thing is the Ponzinibbio knockout's like a good knockout. But Ponzinibbio's washed beyond bits. Like people forget, people don't really forget this, but Ponzinibbio was a guy who was great, and then he almost died, and then he
yeah,
came back not as good, and like his rate of aging in mixed martial arts is just different than other people's, and he hasn't looked good recently. And then wind it back one more, and it's a win over Alex Morono, which if you want to talk about washed, like there's Alex Morono. He hasn't looked good recently either. Lost to Kelvin Gastelum, but Kelvin Gastelum shows up way overweight. Like it's been a weird run for D-Rod. And then like Ian Machado Gary, like how mad am I supposed to get at you for losing that fight if you're D-Rod? Like it's just a lot of things that the fight before that, getting darsed by Neil Magny.
yeah.
Yeesh.
What year was that?
That was 2022, November 5th.
A little more leeway, but that's still not a great look.
Yeah, but the problem is D-Rod's also getting older, so it's like they're aging at the same time. So it's a really weird one. But if you can get darsed by Neil Magny at any point in your career, you can get darsed by Kevin Holland. I do know that for sure. And then just from a styles perspective, like D-Rod, not a very hard hitter, but like good boxing, good jab, goes out there, tries to put some combinations together. But Kevin Holland's going to be bigger, longer, good straight punches as well. So it feels like a lot of the things that D-Rod does well are just going to be null and void in this fight. Like it doesn't feel like a fight where he can get off the actual pieces of offense that he's good at getting off. So that's a pretty bad sign. And just I think Kevin's at a better point in his career. Betting odds as well have it minus 500. Kevin Holland plus 340. D-Rod. So I think that's pretty indicative of a Kevin Holland win as well. So that's the direction I'm going here.
That's crazy because I feel like they don't really give Kevin Holland odds like that too often too, where he's a minus 500. So, yeah. But that's like we've said though, it makes sense.
Yeah, Kevin's the type of guy where if you're willing to lay minus 170 on Kevin Holland when he's fighting a guy he's gonna beat for sure, like you can make money because they usually don't line these types of fights minus 500. Usually when he's in this level of fight, he's around minus 200, give or take. But I guess it is indicative of his recent success that he's been having. So credit to him for that. All right. Down the card, we have Dan Ige versus Patricio Pitbul. I'm very happy they made this fight. For anyone who watched our discussion of Patricio Pitbul, I believe these two fought on the same card, actually. Dan Ige featured prelim. Patricio Pitbul making his debut against Yair Rodriguez. Pitbul takes the loss. Dan Ige picks up a knockout victory over Sean Woodson. And I thought this was a fight they should make. And they booked it. And here we are in a pay-per-view with this fight on the main card. So I'm happy with this fight. I really like this fight. What do you make of Pitbull versus Ige?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I think this is a good direction for Pitbull based off where he was at in that Yair one. So I think it's the perfect fight for him. And then I think Dan Ige's a really good fighter that's gatekeeper level. Unfortunately, I don't think he'll ever be able to put everything together, especially anymore, to be champion. But he's normally one. He's a name I always like when they try to bring up and comers because I think he's a tough fight for everyone with what he offers. So he's the perfect one for like a litmus test for prospects. And I still think this kind of works because we only saw Pitbull one time and he's still a relatively fresh face. So I still think there's that level of interest around these two fighting.
Yeah, I agree. And I just think when you're looking at like they've been using Dan Ige as a gatekeeper practically for a while now. And a lot of times these gatekeepers don't get used in this role to welcome guys who are coming into the UFC. And I think this makes a level of sense. Like we tried out Pitbull against Yair, and was it because he wasn't good enough? Was it because he wasn't ready? Is it because he did an interview saying it was a factor of him fighting for 3 rounds versus 5 rounds? So there's multiple things here that for him, I think he could do better his second time around. And like, we're going to find out. Like, they're giving him a guy who the elite guys tend to beat. As much as I love Danny Gay, if you look at his record, he's got some losses on there, some of them close, some of them not close. But those losses are not to bums. Those are to good fighters. When he fights guys who shouldn't be ranked, he beats them. And he beats some ranked guys, but it's not the guys in the top 5. So it's going to be a great litmus test. And I think it's a matchup that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's going to be a fun one as well. Pitbull's a good boxer. He'll put combinations together. Danny Gay hits really hard with both hands. He'll put his combos together. Um, Interested to see Pitbull's grappling here. Thought he was going to grapple against Yair. That's like, if you can grapple at all and you're fighting Yair, that's kind of a like, this shouldn't be a consideration for you. That's what you do. But I'm interested to see against Danny Gay, who Danny Gay can be grappled, but I'd say he's a harder guy to grapple than Yair. I think maybe he's easier to get to the hips because he's a little smaller, but I'd say he's better defensively. So I think I'm interested to see how Pitbull approaches this, how much success he has. But I'm going with Danny Gay. Betting odds have it. Let's see, Danny Gay minus 215, I think it was. So he's kind of been climbing as a favorite. Minus 215, Ige plus 164 Pitbull. That has been moving in the Pitbull direct, or in the Ige direction. He was about minus 175 last week. And I know that for a fact because I parlayed him with Chris Curtis last week at a better number. So I was kind of surprised when I hopped on today to see minus 215 Ige. But I like Ige more than most, and I usually pick Ige, but he's another guy that we talked about with Holland. Usually doesn't get the respect of the market at this level. Usually you're getting him against, Sean Woodson, I believe, was a pretty closely lined fight. And a lot of times he's in
Woodson
closely
was
lined
favored.
fights. Yeah. So I think it's kind of a surprise he's minus 215 because it usually doesn't get to this point.
Yeah. So I agree with everything. I will say, I think this also can be more fun, a bit more fun to stylistic matchup because I think Yair was probably just a little too fast and with the kicking game he has for a 38-year-old Pitbull. So I do agree with you. I think this one could be some fun, even though people might have a bad taste in their mouth. I don't know how excited or hyped people were on Pitbull coming over to. They're the average fan consensus because everyone knows he was kind of he's washed in the sense of he's past his prime for sure. So, but nevertheless, I still think you could have a fun one here, and I do think, like you said, I'm a bit interested because we've seen Ige be beat using wrestling, but in most of those fights, and even in some of those, I mean, he's not completely getting overtly dominated. I mean, he's stuffing some. I think Bryce Mitchell shot I was trying to look up some of his stats. He was 5 for 15 in that one and stuff, and he's even offensively wrestled in a couple of those tight contested fights himself. So I'm excited for this one, and this is. I mean, this card is still not my favorite, but this is one that it's even though it's not super highly ranked guys or anything like that, like top 5 or anything. I think there's a better chance that this one could be back and forth maybe than Paulo Costa shelling up or just a Kevin Holland walking straight through D-Rod. I think this one could be a little bit competitive one where you're like, okay, maybe it can go either way.
Yeah, I agree. And mentioning that Bryce Mitchell fight, I scored that fight for Danny Gay. I don't know if that's a hot take. I don't know if I was being a touch biased watching it live because I did have a Ige bet there. So I think that's possible that I was a touch on the bias side, but that was a really close fight. And that was like grappling offense versus, damage on the feet. And the one thing I will say is I'm interested to see how Pitbull's durability looks. That's one thing I'm really curious about. And maybe it looks good. Maybe it looks like it's waning, but I'm interested. And then you brought up, I don't know how, or you didn't know how excited people were for Pitbull. I kind of have that similar thought as well, because the people that would like Pitbull coming over to the UFC are like the highly, highly hardcore fans who watched Bellator when it was a promotion. And I think those people were aware enough to know he wasn't coming over at his peak. And then the other portion of the fan base that isn't watching those, or maybe people in general who are just tuning on for the first time, would have no idea. And those people, you watch one Pitbull performance, you're like, I don't give a shit about this guy. So I think I think people are excited about Pitbull, but I don't think anyone on either side of the fandom spectrum is really getting thrilled about a 2025 Pitbull performance, which not ideal considering he was probably a fairly big signing that they're probably paying handsomely. So not ideal.
Yeah. Which in that case too, Pitbull, go out there and make some money.
Yeah, exactly. Go make some cash because he was, to be fair, he was probably Bellator's most highest paid fighter,
That's
but
what I was thinking though too, yeah.
still.
Sometimes Bellator has a better checkbook.
Yeah. All right. Last fight on the main card, and I think this one is the most like, if you're looking to evidence as to why this fight card isn't the greatest, I present you Michael Johnson and Daniel Zellhuber opening the main card. Um, I think this is half like the fight card not being great and half like poor bout placement. Like as much as like Marvin Vittori and Brendan Allen isn't going to be like a stunner of a fight, like they're ranked. Like these guys are not. Michael Johnson at a very, very late stage of his career, 30 fights in the UFC, 15-15. And every time you look at Michael Johnson, that's what his record is. He's 500. I don't know how he does it, but every time you look, he's 500. Or he's one fight over or one fight under, depending on if he's got an odd number of fights. It truly is one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen in the sport. And to credit him, I don't think people realize how hard it is to go 500 in the UFC. A lot more guys don't go 500 and get cut, and you just don't think about those guys. For the guys who are 500 don't really get that much credit. But Michael Johnson has been doing it for a while, has some really good wins under his belt, has a win over the main event, Dustin Poirier. Last fighter to beat Tony Ferguson before Tony Ferguson's historic win streak. Good wins under his belt. But he's going in there against a young prospect in Daniel Zellhuber, and the odds makers have it Daniel Zellhuber minus 590, Michael Johnson a plus 390 underdog. What do you make of this just tremendous lightweight scrap?
Well, first I want to say I was trying to look at some of the big names because I know he has some names. I just saw Bernil Dariush beat him in 2015. It's like what a time to be alive to rewind the clocks. But I'm a huge Michael Johnson fan, just pure off entertainment value. I love the way he fights. I think he's such a fun striker. Unfortunately, he does like losing a lot too, or likes giving up wins when he's winning fights too and getting KO'd. But I think is Zellhuber's last fight still the Rebovix one? I thought I saw that earlier today. So wild that is fight of the year and then takes that long to book another one. The only other thing too I can think with bout order is maybe they really do like Zellhuber and they're trying to set him up on a pay-per-view with Max and Dustin Poirier's potential title or retirement fight, sorry, and that Zellhuber could get another knockout on in front of everyone. But I think this fight should be fun for as long as it lasts, and I just don't think that'll be that long. One, if Michael Johnson wins, he tends to upset people with a knockout. He starches people randomly, and then on the other way, I don't see his chin at his age against Zellhuber lasting. We'll say even midway through the second. So, but while the fight is happening, it should be fireworks. I do think it should be really fun.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think the way I look at this fight is I think Michael Johnson is going to be having much more success than the betting odds would have you believe. I think it's going to be, Michael Johnson's looking good. Michael Johnson's landing shots. And it's going to be like, oh, shit, Michael Johnson's out cold.
Yep.
Like, I think that's the way this fight is going to go. Whether that be, I think it's much more likely that he gets knocked out. Like, Zellhuber's so long that eventually he's just going to go, he's really hitting me a lot. I'm just going to throw one really hard and he'll land and it'll be the end of the fight. It won't even be anything too complex. Or I think he could jump on a submission. He's long arms, just ideal for front choke. So I think that's a possibility as well. But I think knockout the much more likely possibility for Daniel Zellhuber. So I think Zellhuber wins, and I think it's a pretty predictable fight, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm going Zellhuber, but just because I will sprinkle on Michael Johnson, just because I can't help myself.
Yeah, he's plus 390. You don't have to hit 390s at very high rates to come out profitable there. That's why I bet Derek Lewis last week at 225. I was like, 225. Well, it is what it is. We'll see how it goes.
I was going to say real quick too, at least if he loses this one, I know I can hammer him on his next fight, and it'll be a lock. So,
yep, yeah, got to get back to 500 somehow. All right, let's hit some final thoughts, and these prelims are interesting. So I'll let you kick it off here with, and I don't say interesting as like holy shit, these are the greatest prelims of all time, but like there's some names on here that I think hold some weight in some weight classes. So final thoughts, what do you make of some of these fights?
You kind of touched on it earlier, but the Vettori Allen one, obviously those are two people we constantly see at this weight class at middleweight. They both had differing levels of success at different times, being ranked all across the top 10, it seems. Neither fighter really puts together super long win streaks. So, but I just think that's about as middleweight as it gets. That's about as middleweight as it gets, though, too. So there's that one. I think the Kyler Phillips Vinicius Oliveira one should be good. I like Oliveira, and Kyler Phillips in his own right is a pretty good fighter. He's the one that I think he got in trouble for PEDs though, right? So he was on a little run. So we'll see. There's that whole little stench around him, but regardless, I understand why they booked that one at the main event of the prelims, because that one can be some fun. And just the last one, I guess I'll go to. Or two. I do like Bruno Ferreira. I'm not exactly sure who Jackson McVeigh is, but I think Bruno Ferreira, hard hitter. I think he can be a little entertaining. And then the last one I wanted to shout out is Ryan Spann versus Brzezinski. That's a horrendous fight. And maybe don't watch that, but also one of them has to win. And maybe it's not Spann. We'll see.
Yeah.
Preferably not
Spann. So I'll touch on that. The ones you just talked about, they're the last two. Ferreira versus McVeigh. McVeigh is, I don't know much about the guy, but he was supposed to fight a couple weeks ago, and the guy came in just absolutely obese. So they canceled the fight, and they said, "Here, fight Bruno Ferreira instead." Like that's a good thing. And so tough matchup for a UFC debut for a guy with, I think he's got 6 pro fights. So, ugh. And I like some of those other fights as well. Kyler Phillips versus Vinicius Oliveira. Understand why it's the featured prelim. I wouldn't hate this being a main card fight either, but at that point, you're kind of, it's not really that big of a difference at that point in a broadcast. And then we've got some contender series guys. Tebo Gautier versus Robert Valentin. Valentin, a tough guy. Gautier, big favorite. Dana White contender series guy. Big, physical, hits hard as shit, very young, high ceiling on him. We'll see how that pans out over the course of his career, but it's at least worth watching because there aren't very many guys with his physical attributes in the UFC. Islam Dulatov versus Adam Fugit. We've got Dulatov as a guy who just absolutely murdered somebody on Contender Series, and now we're giving him a guy who just fights prospects that we think can kill him. So I think it's a pretty clear line that they kind of want Dulatov to go out there and kill Adam Fugit and add a highlight to his resume. So we'll see how that goes. I will say Dulatov is, for at least for 5 minutes, he's a fun striker to watch. If he has to grapple, it may get dicey. If he has to fight longer than 5 minutes, it may get dicey. But we may not see those problems on Saturday. I think it's probably he gets that knockout. And then we've got some interesting fights here. We've got Francisco Prado versus Nikolai Varetnikov. Prado's a guy I like, but he's a lightweight, just insistent on fighting at welterweight. So don't love that. We'll see how that goes for him. Jimmy Crute versus Marcin Prachnio. Jimmy Crute, a -300 favorite in a UFC fight in the year of 2025. but he's fighting Marcin Prachnio. So how much can I complain? I kind of can't. Ryan Spann, Lukasz Brzeski, like you said, that is doesn't get much more heavyweight than that.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's funny because one guy wasn't even a heavyweight that long ago.
He moved up because he thought he'd have a better chance of winning.
Exactly. So that's an interesting one. I don't know if I'll bet Lukasz Brzeski, but what I will say is I've just been like, yeah, you heavyweight underdog. Do they have a chance at all? And then if they do, I bet them. And over the course of a lot of heavyweight fights, it's done me kind of well. Derek Lewis last week, Walter Walker last week, I did not bet on, but if I would have, that's another heavyweight underdog. Rizvan Kunaev should have beat Curtis Blades. Volkov should have beat Cyril Gane. That should have been 2 more. Hit on Waldo as an underdog once or twice, actually. Waldo plus 200 against Robelis de Spain. In hindsight, it's one of the craziest lines we've ever seen. Lukasz Brzeski plus 200 against Walter Walker. So I just tend to think that if you're betting on heavyweights, take the guys that are plus 175, plus 200 and higher, and just like it's going to work out for you. I just don't know if I have the balls to go on this one with Brzeski Spann. It feels like that's one you want to keep your money away from. So, only fight we didn't talk about. Opening the main card, Carly Giudice and Nicole Cagliari, I believe the name is. Yes. Giudice from Louisiana. Not bad so far in the UFC. Don't know a ton about Cagliari, to be honest. So don't have much to say on that one. But Giudice has kind of had a couple fights in the UFC and has been better than okay, if that makes sense. Like she's been enough to, jot the name down and keep an eye on. So that's more than I can say for a lot of women who make their UFC debut. So
better than okay is really good.
Yes, especially on there's certain weight classes, light heavyweight, in women. If you are better than okay, that translates to really, really, really good.
Yeah.
So maybe she'll end up being that good. Who knows? All right. It is only 57 minutes into this. We kind of got in and got out. Some of these fights we didn't really have a ton to say, and that is a product of the card itself. But I do think that come Saturday night, there's going to be a lot of these fights that might be a tad bit on the ridiculous side, but I do think a lot of these, obviously the main event is pretty secure to be a fun one. But outside of that, I think we've got a lot of potential for at least fun and or finishes, one of the two, with the exception being Paulo versus Kopylov. But I think Paulo versus Kopylov could, if we hit the nail on the head there, we might get a great fight. But that one has kind of the biggest potential to absolutely suck. So not the greatest pay-per-view, but I do think come Saturday night, I do think it could put out a good product if that makes sense.
I agree.
Make sure to everyone, last week, no best bets. This week there will be best bets, and there will also be a preview. And Jerry wasn't here with us today, but Jerry's picks will be in the preview per usual, as well as myself and Anthony going in detail on all 5 main card fights. So make sure to check that out. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to vendettasportsmedia.com, do all that type of stuff. We really appreciate it. And tune in next week when we break down what we saw, and maybe we'll have to find a way to talk a little bit about UFC Abu Dhabi, because that is a great card with some highly ranked fights. So it might end up being a split there between preview and recap next week. So make sure to tune in for that. Thank you.